What you can see here is what I think might be the first official, unofficial Initial D game. And as you can see, this is already not bad at all. So if we start driving here, this is obviously a non-profit fan game, so you should go into this with very, very different expectations that you would have for even an indie game. But I've never really covered fan racing game fan games on neither this channel nor any of my other channels, so I kind of wanted to give a spotlight to this one in particular, because it is quite interesting. Now, Initial D does have an official game series called Arcade Stage. There have also been various other Initial D games for console, namely the PSP and PS3, and I think also the PS2 had one. But if I'm going to be perfectly honest, I wasn't like a massive fan of any of them. I did play the Initial D arcade games in arcade in Japan, and for that experience they are actually great. They are perfectly serviceable arcade games that you can just play with a friend, and they're fun for that. But when it comes to just like an experience that you can get at home, I feel like both these and pretty much all the other Initial D games have been kind of lacking, at least for me. They aren't really what I would want out of an Initial D game, and I think even though this game here, which by the way is called Initial D, which as you can see here is called Initial D Toge Spirit, I think hits more the notes that I would want out of Initial D game. So I think first of all, I think that is quite obvious, is the art style is like pretty much on point here. Like I think they kind of try to replicate the style from the movies, right? Which was kind of supposed to more lean into the manga style of the original Initial D manga, and just kind of blend that together with the 3D animations of that movie. And I think to that end, I think this is quite good. Like you have these weird like stripes along the car, and in general like everything looks like fairly simplistic, fairly minimalistic. Katakana, you know, showing up when you pull off a drift. So like in terms of art style, I think this makes like a really good case study for like what I actually want out of an Initial D game, an official one even. Because I think this is just way more like it. It feels way more like the anime or the manga than any of the arcade games. So for anyone who hasn't seen the arcade games either yet, this is basically what they look like. And like, it's kind of weird to like judge these as like actual games, because since they're arcade titles, they, you know, you're supposed to just kind of like walk into the arcade, play like a round or two with a friend, and then just kind of move on. I think it's kind of a shame because once again, like I'm actually a massive Initial D fan, and I would like to have a dedicated single-player title on the Initial D brand, and we're just not really getting one of these. This is just not really hitting right for me, because it just has this like fairly generic, quote-unquote, realistic look that we see from all games all the time, basically, especially racing games. And I think the fan game just hits this art style way more that I would like to see from Initial D game, where you can really tell like, okay, this is based on an anime that is based on a manga, right? So I've never really like truly warmed up with this, especially because you have to consider, since this is an arcade game, it comes with the usual arcade nonsense if you actually want to play this more than a couple times, if you want to play this more in a more dedicated way. Yeah, you know, it's at this point it's just up to the fans to just kind of make their own Initial D game, so to say, that is more meant for people like me who are just losers at home that want to play racing games, you know. But obviously the Initial D arcade games will always have the edge, because they have all the newest cars. They have in general a ton of cars. I think they might even have some customization, and also all the Initial D branding, right? But like as I said earlier, like you couldn't even tell that this was an Initial D game, wasn't it, for these like two character models here, right? And I think that's just kind of what is kind of missing for me in these games here. And admittedly, compared to the arcade game, this does look a little bit more rough. And now keep in mind, this is just the very first public demo of this title, right? So I don't expect this to be super polished and up there with like full-fledged games in any kind of capacity. This is still very much in development. This is far from done. But I think like you can already kind of tell that this is just kind of, it screams more Initial D in pretty much every single way. I will say that I'm already quite happy with how this is shaping out. Now, there's definitely some things here that I would maybe still critique. I think the handling is a little bit floaty, as you can see. Like if I'm just trying to like steer in, you know, in a straight line, it is very much like still arcade racer, like don't get it wrong. And I think this is just kind of where this should stand as well. I wouldn't want this to be like super realistic. I think there's just other games out there for that. Hell, you could probably even play Tokyo Extreme Racer Drift 2 if that's something you want. Like, I think this still being an arcade racer is definitely more the way to go. But yeah, that being said, I think that steering could be a little bit more snappy, a little bit more direct. It's a little, you know, you can kind of see what's going on here. And then another thing that I noticed is that the brakes are way too strong. This kind of makes it actually hard to brake for corners, because sometimes I just want to slow down a little bit. And even if I just tap the brake, like look at that, you know, we're already down 30 kilometers per hour. Once again, this is still in development, so, you know, this is just kind early critique that I want to give here. I don't want to like already start complaining and being like, oh, you know, this is the worst thing ever. Absolutely not. Because in general, like, once again, I think this is super, super cool. The fact that apparently just one guy, by the way, this wasn't even made by like a team of like 2 or 3 people. This was all done by one guy in his free time. And I think for that, this is quite impressive. Especially if you consider this is surprisingly running on the Unreal Engine. Now, I think it is running on Unreal Engine 5, but I can't really confirm it. It might also run on Unreal Engine 4. And I know this is already raising a bunch of like alarm bells, like, oh god, here comes the next Unreal Engine 5 game that is super unoptimized. Not this game. If I enable the performance overlay, I did cap the frame rate to 120 FPS, but this game is always running uncapped, so if you do want to try out this demo yourself, make sure to do that. And you can see it is actually just, like, there's zero stutter. I mean, you would kind of expect it, considering the game is obviously a little bit more simplistic. You can even see the track itself, you know, the trees. It's all fairly simplistic, so you wouldn't really expect this to have any kind of performance issues, but yeah, this should absolutely run on even the most dogshit potato PC from 20 years ago. Okay, maybe not 20 years ago, but like 10 years ago. And yeah, the guy who's working on this is actually documenting the development process of this game on his own YouTube channel. I'll link both his channel and the link to his Discord server, where you can download the demo if you're interested, down in the description below. And there's a bunch of interesting stuff here. Like, I'm not even sure how I managed to find this. I think one of the videos was just randomly in my recommended. I think it was this one here. There's a bunch of really cool stuff here that I think is super interesting. Namely, a split-second remake, which I might cover in a separate video if you ever decides to release a public demo for this as well, and most of you guys, or a large part of you guys, would like to see it as well. But I just kind of wanted to go through the development history and see how the game kind of developed over time. And so here we have the first iteration of this fan game, and you can see it looks definitely a little bit more rough. There's just something not quite right with the handling and the camera, and maybe also the speed. There's some weird jittering here, but there are some things from this that I do actually somewhat miss. Namely, the pops and bangs of the exhaust. I think they might still be there, but they're just not as noticeable anymore, I guess. And like, this is really cool, like, especially how it lights up the entire area and how loud they are. I think is super cool. But also the light trails. Now, once again, like, since all of this is still work in progress, these things might actually come back at some point. Or he might, like, revise them in some kind of way. But I will actually genuinely say, for, like, the first iteration, this already looks quite promising. The art style is kind of there. It's missing, like, a few of the bells and whistles we saw in the demo. But not bad. Like, as like a first draft to show off and upload to YouTube, it's already pretty interesting, I think. And so here's a second update for this game, and you can see that things have changed quite a bit here. So the camera has been kind of readjusted, the HUD looks a little bit different, and one thing that I missed from this one is probably the speed lines that you can see in the corners. And I think, I'm not sure if the motion blur was in the demo, I kind of forgot. But also I just think the handling in a straight line looks a little better here, right? Like, this is, you can kind of tell that the car is just kind of like gripping a little bit more. It's not like floating over the track where the back is just kind of like sliding from side to side. So, you know, it just kind of goes to show how difficult it is to make a good handling model for this game, because you might make one aspect better, but then another aspect becomes slightly worse, and it's always this like kind of balancing act where you have to make sure that everything works together, right? Like, the drifting feels satisfying, or like just generally sliding feels satisfying, but also like straight line gripping makes sense and looks believable. It is really, really difficult to make a handling model for a game like this. And I think in this showcase here in particular, he's mainly just gripping around the corners. Yeah, as you can see here, you know, like, it is a little bit more challenging to drift here, We can see that there's some kind of like weird understeering here. I think he might go for it again. Yeah, see, this is exactly what I mean. Like, you know, everything in the straight line looked a little bit, looked much better. But the drifting has now kind of suffered as a result. This is exactly what I mean. Like, it is just really, really difficult to make handling models like this. Where everything just kind of works together in a way that makes sense, you know. And then we have this version that I think is much more closer to what we get in the public demo now. You can still see that the handling is somewhat different here. But it is definitely getting there to what we've played earlier. A little bit rough still around the edges, but the HUD has actually like stayed the same now across both this, you know, this demo that we played and this video here. And going back into the demo, there is actually a little bit more that I can share here. So apparently there's supposed to be a full-on story mode, which at the moment is still locked. But I would assume that you can probably play through a bunch of races from the initial story, which is cool and makes sense. I think it would also be cool to just kind of get like fantasy matchups, you know, stuff from, you know, with like all the characters from the series, but races that weren't actually in the story, but, you know, just as like a little what-if scenarios, I guess that's the word I was looking for. And at the moment, the only track that you have access to is Mount Akina. I'm not sure how accurate this is, or where this track was taken from, or if this was maybe done specifically for this game, I'm not sure. But you can at least decide if you want to go uphill or downhill. We did downhill earlier, so let's actually do uphill this time. And here's a quick look at all of the cars that are supposed to be in the game, at least in the future. For now, we only have access to the A86, the Mazda RX-7 that I drove earlier, and the Silvia. Now, I would obviously love to drive the A86, but for whatever reason, when I shift into first, the car only drives at 1 km per hour, which I think might be a bug or whatever. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. So let us try the S13 this time around. But generally, I know I'm repeating myself a lot here, but I just really, really love how this is looking. Like, you can tell that this is actually a racing game with an atmosphere. I think this does the anime style probably better than any other racing game I've seen yet. So you have, like, for example, the people here, the crowd members here, are just 2D anime people, right? Like, which, you know, is super cool. And I think also, like, in general, like, the rest of the game, it just looks more anime than any other anime racing game I've played up to this point. And this is what, in my opinion, makes this such a good case study for, honestly, how important the art style can be to a racing game, and how annoying it is how these days we're just getting these like super hyper realistic graphics with honestly pretty much every racing game that comes out. Even the arcade races go for this like photorealistic style, which I don't think is necessary. Like, I think there's a lot of love still there for racing games that have an alternative art style. Like the game that gets mentioned the most, and I think a lot of people would probably compare to as well. Holy schmoly, dude. Like, one comparison I'd imagine a lot of people would draw is to Auto Modelista, which was a cel-shaded racing game, which also like still gets brought up a lot for racing games with a cool art style. And I think you could honestly slide this one in there as well. And I think I would love to just see more racing games experiment with art styles again, go crazy. And this is what bothered me so much about, for example, Need for Speed Unbound. Although it seemed to be a massive complaint that the graffiti art style was just not good and many people didn't like it, I don't think it's that. I think it's just that it clashed with the rest. Because that's what bothered me, is that Need for Speed Unbound was this super photorealistic game on the surface, and then they just slapped these graffiti cartoon effects on top of it. Like, they didn't really go all the way with it. It's just kind of what bothered me about it. And this is exactly what this game does. Like, you still have the, the lettering there, the katakana there showing up if you pull off a drift, which is honestly exactly the same thing that Unbound did. But this game goes all the way with it. Like, this game has the, effects go completely all the way. Like, on the car, and also just generally the art style just fits. It just fits together better. And I think this is the important thing to mention when it comes to implementing an art style to a racing game. Don't just like throw a bunch of stuff together and then just have it be a weird mess of photorealistic stuff and artistic stuff. It just never works. And that's really the main discussion point I wanted to bring up with this video. Obviously, this project is really, really, really cool, and I'm gonna keep an eye on it as well. And if there are any major updates, I might make an update video on this game as well. But really, the talking point of the video, this is kind of like what this video was disguised at. Art styles in racing games. I want to see more of it. And tell me, am I going crazy? Does every single racing game these days need to be realistic? Like, I get it for the super sim games, like the hardcore sims, like you want an, you know, a realistic art style or just photorealism, because it's supposed to represent and replicate the driving experience as authentically as possible. But when it comes to like just fun arcade games like this, dude, just hit me up, man. And I think indie developers understand this so much better with games like, for example, Art of Rally is one of my favorite examples to bring up, honestly. But even fan games, I feel like this one understand this way better, that racing games deserve to have an art style, and you know, not every single racing game needs to be hyper realistic. And I do think this is, you know, not just a developer issue, but it's also a community issue. I'm not sure why especially racing games get declared as mobile games or having a mobile game look so much more than anything else. Like every single racing game at some point got compared to a mobile game, which is so stupid. Like, just because something has a bit of an art style and a bit of, you know, it tries to do something a little bit different, doesn't already make it look like a mobile game. It's such a stupid argument that gets thrown around all the time just because a racing game doesn't look super realistic. So it is definitely also a bit of a community issue, and I think people like us that enjoy racing games should just be more open to accepting cool, different art styles like this one. Okay, I think with that rant, I can finally round up this video. Once again, if you want to check out this project, I want to stay up to date with it, you can find both the link to the channel of the guy who made this and his Discord server in the description below. On the Discord server, you can download this demo as well if you want to check it out. It's very brief, so you've pretty much almost seen everything. But if you still want to try out the game yourself, you know, get a feeling for the handling, feel free to go for it. And yeah, also let me know if you want me to cover more fan games. To be honest, racing game fan games are a bit of a rarity. I feel like in other niches of gaming, fan games are a bit more common, especially in the Sonic space. But for racing games, it's kind of hard to find anything. So if you know any cool fan games in the racing game genre that you want me to check out, tell me about them in the comments. Maybe I'll do like a roundup video where I just show some of my favorites. But yeah, thanks so much for watching once again. Appreciate it. And until next time, take care, take it easy. And as always, peace. See you guys.